Hello, mate.
Hey, Mass.
So, Patrick James, head coach, March on Victoria, previous head coach, March on Stratford, general big dog. Uh, we just said before we press record, same as the other three chats now. Um, I'm keen for this just to be another chat that Paddy and I have because the conversations are always so good and I get a lot out of them. I get a lot of value out of them. I get a lot of things to think about. I get a lot of value. I get a lot of reflections back to myself as well from Pad. Um, so if I can, or if we can make that happen today, where we just have one of our flowy chats that we have, I think people will get a lot out of it.
Yeah,
So I have
nice.
no script. I have no questions. Let's just see where we go. But I'm going to start just by knowing where you're up to. I'm just going to start by offering you up this, and then we'll go from there and see how it goes.
Mm.
Talk to me about where you're up to in not just in March on, but in your coaching practice for you, your personal coaching practice, and what I guess you're currently experiencing as your general challenge.
Yeah. It's for context for those listening, it's a very regular topic of conversation between you and I and between Jens and I of this idea of art versus science with coaching. And it's a daily battle in my head. Not necessarily a battle, but it's a narrative that I'm constantly sort of flip-flopping between the two because there are in within coaching anyway, I'm very detail orientated. Um, I like the idea of trying to systemize things, create structure, create blueprints, create cheat sheets, whether that's in my own head or whether that's for people, the coaches that I work with to follow. Because when I first started in the industry, coaching and started to take it more seriously, having things like energy system cheat sheets of like almost like like the OPEX map one, map two, map three is like we're trying to work on this. When X, use Y, etc., etc. And I think for me, having that structure really allowed me to kind of become freer from it.
Mm,
So I think that there's always this idea of me wanting to have detail, and wanting to be detail orientated and wanting to have reference points, which is not a bad thing at all. Um, but I think then with the conversations that I've had with Ollie, March on that is in the past, is you know, I have a voice and I have a part to play in March on Gyms as it grows and develops. And something that he has said to me a few times is think about how we can grow this and how we can make it consistent across gyms. So like what's the essence of a March on Gym? What's the recipe that goes into a class to make it somewhat distinctive or make it recognizable to someone from the outside. So what I've then tried to do and using that as not necessarily a North Star, but something to guide me is how can we create systems or how can we create structure or a repetition across all the gyms to allow for it to be systemized for allow for there to not really be that many differences because it then means that the coaches don't necessarily have to think so much for themselves and they just deliver. And then when someone goes to March on Bath or someone goes to March on Victoria or someone goes to March on Stratford, they are experiencing the same thing. And there isn't one that is much better than the other because we've got this way that we deliver things. We've got this way that a class runs. We've got this way that we coach. We've got this program, etc., etc. Then over the last year, or at the start of this year, it's then been almost doing the opposite of that. and trying to then keep some of the consistency and some of the structure, but then how can we
Who's doing the opposite?
we're trying to do the opposite now
Mm. Okay.
as a coaching team to then almost put the awareness and the ownership back on the coach individually to get them to think more for themselves. Because what I think has happened with certain things that I've tried to implement or we've tried to implement is that it has then meant that people have just kind of been on autopilot, myself
Mm.
included, when delivering things on the coaching floor. And what that's meant is that it's been quite robotic. In a positive way, in that it's been consistent, but also in a negative way, in that it's become robotic. And this is exactly your, a big part of a big talking point that you often talk about, and we talk about, you and I together, is the idea that it's all about the people and the person in front of you. And as a coach, the better that you can listen, the better that you can observe, the better that you can piece together each puzzle that's in front of you on an individual basis, the better the coaching experience the person on the receiving end will have. And instead, what's happened is by trying to systemize, it's probably then become a little bit artificial in a way. So this is this constant sort of battle, or not battle, but like cyclical process of art versus science, and trying to make all of the coaches or empower them to be able to think more for themselves, um, and for it to be more of an art rather than it to be a tick box or a cheat sheet or yeah, the science.
What a start. So much in there. One of the earlier things he said there was structure for you as a younger coach gave you freedom.
Mm,
Can you unpack that a little further? Like, what did that feel like? What was give me a practical example of that. Like, just take me into your world then as young Paddy coaching,
yeah,
with armed with, you know, your map system, for instance.
yeah,
How did that play out for you, and how did you get that sense of freedom from that injection of structure?
yeah. I think maybe not necessarily, definitely yes, freedom, but I think confidence in understanding or having conviction with what I was programming and then delivering
Mm,
when I was starting to write. Like I had a level of intuition for what had worked for me in the past, or things that I had programs that I had done, and oh, it makes sense for me to do X and then Y, but then to have, like, on the strength side of what OPEX did really, really well back in the day was, which was a training course for those that don't know. It was like an online courses. Mass knows better than anyone, because he was part of it. But the the guidelines that they would have, it would be like a 60-second Sorensen hold, or it would be an 8 RM split squat. And it's kind of like you have almost these pathways or tick boxes or hoops for your clients to jump through to progress them from A to B, B to C, C to D. And it just meant that you had such a sort of a clear pathway that had a lot of science and had a lot of thought put into it, that meant that you didn't necessarily have to stress or think too much around it. And you could be like, okay, cool. I did my assessment with this client and they had X, they had Y. Cool. That means that I need to plug hole with A and B exercise to develop said assessment that we've underpinned. And then as that progresses, I can then move them from this exercise to the next sort of
yep,
thing.
yep.
And it just meant for me that had so much more confidence and conviction with what I was doing, because I there was a system and a process in place that was clear for me to reference back to and be like, ah, yeah, no, that here's my here's my train tracks that I'm going on, but at any point I can deviate from that and get off at the next stop, sort of thing, and have a play around with doing this or have a play around with doing that. But my full body resistance structure 3 times a week looked like this.
Mm,
And that's when looking at things like OPEX was really when I started to appreciate those structures and those systems, because it just gave you the almost like not paint by numbers, but like, that clear guidelines for you to follow.
cool. So that for you, you would put in the science bucket.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically a set of rules in which to, or a set of theories, right? For you to work with, and then not to fill in the gaps for you, but then when you say freedom, knowing all that stuff and putting it into practice means that you don't have to think about it as much, and therefore you have the freedom then to do all of the other stuff that you would do in the coaching. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think knowing that, almost like an 80-20 rule in a way, knowing that the vast, it's like the pillars of your nutrition are made up of like good quality whole foods, eating enough of the right things, etc. So then having this 20% of, playing or messing around with other things or experimenting meant that they had, a good structure, or you had a good reference point, and then could, have the freedom to be like, fuck it, let's try a trap bar deadlift instead, or something like that.
Nice, nice. So in unpacking that a little bit and explaining it a bit further, we can see that that was part of a process for you, right?
Mm.
To get from where you were and then through the acquisition of these technical elements that have helped you, these tools, right? That you've then sharpened over time,
Mhm.
um, to get to the point where you are now. Um, where, if I can speak for you, you can now walk onto the gym floor with all of those technicalities and tools saved in your subconscious, somewhat automated, and therefore have much more bandwidth, brain space, whatever you want to call it, to take place in the art. Fair?
Yeah, 100%. I think and again, it's always then going, having this constant dialogue of like, it's the mixture of like what they need versus what they want, sort of thing. It's like the enjoyment versus what would be optimal. And, another example is of like, without going too much of a tangent, but program design for the gym, writing the like what I deem to be a great online program versus that would get them the best results versus a program that would potentially be more enjoyable or be better in a class setting. It's like things like I've programmed in the past hamstring ISO calf holds, and there's a lot of benefit to doing those exercises. But if people have got like a 4 to 6 week progression of hamstring ISOs, they're fucking bored. And we're bored coaching it as well. And it's then like balancing that. That's just as much art versus science as well, of all of those things where I could I could have Sally do X variation because that's probably going to allow her to load up her quads more, but she much prefers this variation because it means that she's training with Sandra or whatever. Like there are so many variables that go into the person or the people in front of you outside of what's optimal. So it's about, calling yourself out on your own bullshit as to like, hold on, how important is that? Or do they really need to be doing that when they could be doing this instead?
So then what we talk about as optimal then is only in line or only connected to a definition of success,
Mm,
right? So and I know you don't mean it this way, but I'm going to pick up on it just because it's easy for me to do so to make the point.
Mm.
You said moving away from optimal. I know you don't mean that. What it actually probably is moving towards the client's optimal, but away from your optimal as you see it for its use in your program design,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
right? And so then we're going, oh, okay. Now we're back to the point where we're remembering what we're doing in the first place. We're trying to help Sally out.
Yeah.
So so then, and I don't even know where I don't even know where that sits in art and science. That's just back to coaching. But I think we're all guilty at times of getting lost in trying so hard to do the right job and do a good job, using all the rules and sciences and theories and things that have gone before, that we forget why we're doing it.
Mm.
Um, and I see it so much on Instagram today. Coaches having back and forths and various levels of emotion and heated debates and however long these things go on for about one movement. And the question that always just rings in my mind, despite the fact that they might be having fun having the back and forth and a bit of a battle and what have you, and trying to win, if you like. At what point do we think about the client? And then at that point, none of that matters, or it matters much less. And so then the whole thing is put into perspective, which I think then is a cool segue into the one of the next points that you mentioned around, I guess, the current challenge as the gym numbers grow to create clarity around what is a march on gym and what does it do? And I guess the next question that sits behind that might be a little more unsaid, for want of a better phrase, um, is why are we different? So why is somebody going to choose to come to a march on gym as opposed to going to somebody else, right? That's probably where we're looking to get to. But with everything that we've just spoken about there, I'm not sure personally, and I might be wrong in this, but I'm not sure whether or not the answer lies in a technicality or in a particular objective truth, more so than it does our ability as a brand and as a group of coaches to make it all about selling.
Mm.
Because as I see, sorry, mate, I'm taking over a bit, but I'm just on a bit of a
No,
roll. As as I see it in the industry at the moment, unfortunately, that's a niche in itself. Like how many, despite the fact how enjoyable it is, or how entertaining it is, or how much we get, on all this stuff around all these classes, each to their own, and all the rest of it. But how many of them, from a coaching point of view, can hand on heart say we make this all about selling? How many people? How many people can do that? And I don't think there's many today.
Mm.
And I think that in itself is a differentiator. So
Yeah.
I actually think that whilst we might be looking and challenging ourselves for this thing, like what do we do? And we're perhaps in danger then of getting too far into the weeds of a particular thing, or we don't do this, but we do the other. I think the answer might be right under our nose, and it's what we all care about the most.
Mm.
What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think when I think about other sort of alternatives to a march on class, I think F45, Barry's, One Rebel, CrossFit classes, personal training, small group PT. Now, there might be some rare small group PT gyms that would be able to do that if they've got, an experienced head coach that has been in the game for a while, that is really, a people person, values that connection, and probably kind of sets the standard and is a role model that attracts other coaches in that one facility, or maybe they've got two, but that's going to be really, really rare. I think there might be the occasional CrossFit gym that might do the same, that is more community based. Of every CrossFit gym will say that they're community based, but actually really cares about their community, members that are properly bought into being part of something that isn't just them training on their own. The sort of CrossFit gyms where everyone stays at the end and cheers people on, etc., etc. And again, they're few and far between. And then you've got the more sort of more popular, more pumped out Barrys, etc., which don't care at all about you as much as they might tell you that they do. They really don't. When you've got 45 people in a nightclub-esque environment, all just folding themselves in half. Um, so yeah, I think it gives us an opportunity to be able to find that middle ground or separate ourselves where we can create an environment where people feel like they can train a lot with other people. So there's that almost like social lifting club, or that, it feels a bit like you're playing your five-a-side football team, or you're back at university playing netball or whatever it was that you did. So you have that camaraderie and that community element where you're training alongside other people. You have a coach in front of you that isn't just delivering what's on the whiteboard. They're giving this as a guide, but then being able to have the experience and the knowledge to be able to adjust based off of the feedback that the clients are giving them or the members are giving them, and making appropriate changes if there needs to be any, or making sure that, how are you feeling today, etc., etc., and then adequately challenging them on the floor. But then outside of all of that as well is making sure that they are challenged adequately and supported with things like nutrition, with things like lifestyle, with things like stress management. As much as we as a company, we talk about without limits and better as a choice, there's it doesn't mean that you need to be doing some form of ultra endurance event every weekend for that to be your identity. Without limits or better as a choice might be a 65-year-old that started coming to the gym when she's never been into the gym in her entire life. And that's her identity of better as a choice or without limits. And I think like there are very few environments and very few gyms that could do that full stop. So I think exactly to your point, that's almost the USP where, and I think potentially why, as we're kind of hashing this out, as we're talking about it, why it's not necessarily the first thing that we think of is because it's probably so innate, and it's just part of all of the people that we have within across the coaching team, that it's just almost an unspoken rule that it's a value or it's a behavior that doesn't necessarily need to be said, because we all give a shit about the people in front of us. So naturally it becomes us caring about the members and the people that we're trying to help. So yeah.
Brilliant. And that's understandable, right? So we don't need to think about that stuff. Like you said, that stuff happens automatically. Just to correct your language, because I know you're being humble there. I don't think that's a middle ground. I think that's a higher ground.
Mm,
And that's not necessarily saying that we're better than anybody else, but as far as a value or a service is concerned, it is a higher ground because what we're if I'm just to unpack what you're saying there, what we're talking about is providing a service that puts the person that's paying for the service right in the center of it.
mm,
So it's not like our whiteboard and our things in the center of this service, and then mill around the outside of it and hopefully shoehorn yourself in at some point. It's no, this is about you. And every single one of our coaches is going to do their damnedest and their best to try and make it about you. And they're not always going to get it bang on. And the
mm,
challenge that you go away with isn't always going to be optimal. And if you're not watching the video, I just did my air quotes. But we're trying.
mm,
And so the intention, I think, is what matters here. And that for me is the differentiator for every march on gym, is that you can sense that intention as soon as you walk in the place. And there are clues, right? So as the saying goes, class leave clues. So as soon as you walk in, like everything is class, from the coffee machine to, the flooring to the lighting to, and then to the softer side of things, to the greeting that you get from everybody that's in there, and not
mm.
just the coaches.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's the culture that's created.
Yeah.
Why is that culture created? Because it's it's born and raised out of connection.
Mm.
And that's the key. That's the key. And, you know, if we're being picky, and I'll say this because I can, because, you know, I don't really care what anybody else thinks. I'll tell the truth. There are coaches that have come and gone from this business that don't hold those values, and
Mm.
they care less about that connection piece, and so they didn't really fit, and so they had to leave. That was the nature of it, and what we've ended up with then, and you know, I'm sure, you know, it'll happen again, and you know, it'll be shaken up again, and the right people will stay around, and then the wrong people will leave, and so on and so forth as it all grows. But the key to the whole piece is that the culture demands connection as a priority. So the without limits thing, that extends to it. It's like, and I know that's going to be the chat for any coach to any potential client coming in. There'll be a question in there in a roundabout way that challenges them. Are you ready for growth? And it won't be as direct as that, but it'll be in some sort of way. Are you ready for growth? Because that's what we're about here.
Yeah.
And that's what Without Limits says to me. And that's what Better is a Choice says to me. It's about growth.
Mm.
And we do that through education.
Mm.
We can only educate by connecting. Because as you know, the saying goes, education is something you do with somebody, not to somebody.
Mm.
And so the whole thing is shaped around the collaborative effort. And that for me, having been in this industry a long time and seen many, many gyms of different levels, is the thing that sets a March on gym out from any others. I genuinely go in each of our gyms and get a sense that this is different from anything I've seen and felt before.
Mm.
And then, despite the fact that there's a commonality between the gyms, there's also the individuality of each gym on top of that, which I think is really cool.
Mm.
And I would actually, you touched on it a little bit when you did your opening piece, but I think the opposite, where we try and tie down to the finite detail as to what a march on gym is, and then how it operates, and so the coaches don't. It becomes sterile. It becomes sterile,
Mm.
and so the personalities of the people who are leading the thing don't shine through, and then it becomes less authentic. The connection suffers. Without Limits becomes a pipe dream. Just becomes a sign on the front.
Mm.
So for me, as I look on from the outside, which is always a nice position to take, right? I've less emotion in it. I'm not in it day to day, and I can, I guess, organize my thoughts a little easier. What already exists, what already built the gyms to what they are today, is the thing that differentiates them from anything else.
Mm. Yeah. I think you and I both, having been in various gyms and worked in different environments, etc., we both felt that when we first came into March on. It
Yeah,
just I remember vividly my first day. I was there sniffing around when you had your first day as
yeah,
well. And that greeting and care that you get with everyone. And obviously you as a person coming into an environment are on your best behavior. So you're like actively like seeking conversation and seeking connection with the other people around you. But all like everyone else, I remember everyone that I spoke to on my first couple of days, just so welcoming and so warm. They had no idea who I was. And they were just that is part of like, it's again, it's unspoken customer service, but that um that ribbon or that like that string runs through the whole of the business and the whole of everything that we do, from a class to someone coming in to buy sups or someone just coming in to buy a coffee. All of that, just care for making sure that people are looked after.
yeah, yeah. And you just mentioned coffee there. It just triggered my thought. Just as a metaphor or an analogy around that, it's the difference between a Starbucks and a great independent coffee shop, right? And you and I talk about this. Me and Genzo love it as well. When you go into somebody else's domain, their place of excellence where they shine, and you watch a barista put the care into your little cup of coffee, and they don't need to. It's just a fucking cup of coffee, but they do, and it makes it better. It makes it better. Whereas in the Starbucks scenario, it's all right, it's okay, but it's not about you, despite the
Mm,
fact you put your name on it. You know that that's not authentic. It's
yeah.
and the jokes around spelling the names and all the rest of it. But it's not about that. It's not about putting a name on the thing. It's about putting a feeling into a thing.
Mm,
And that's the difference. And that's what you get a match on. So yeah, it's not my place. And I'm probably speaking out of turn. And maybe I'll have to run this episode by edit before we put it out. But
mm,
I'd hate to see March on become Starbucks and I don't think it will, but I'd hate to see that in an attempt to try and organize the growth. I think the opposite would be a win, where we keep the organic nature of it and we keep the strong values that just go unsaid because they're embodied.
mm,
They're embodied. That's the key. Just happens. Like the same as the barista who's making your coffee. They don't have to say anything. You just watch the care that they're putting into the thing, how
mm.
much time they take, you know, they make their art and all the rest of it. And they do that for every single fucking cup. They don't
Yeah,
need to. They love it. That's why they do it.
yeah,
We're the same, right?
yeah. Yeah, I think it's about making sure that we have the right people in place to drive each of those cultures, which we do have, right? So I'm the head coach here at Victoria. We've got Liam driving the culture and the standards at Stratford. We've got Justin driving the culture and standards at Bath. Got Al driving the standards at HQ. So you naturally have people that you just have to make sure that those people care about it as much as Ollie does. And that's the thing is that we all do. We all treat it as if it's our name above it. So I think that's why, and that boil bleeds into the other people that are around us and our other coaches. They feel that sense of it being theirs too. And the if we can retain that as we continue to grow and as much as March on may have however many sites it might have, the people within each of those sites, as we've kind of talked about as a general theme, have the freedom to almost have the like idiosyncrasies and the small things that make that gym to for it to feel not sterile and for it to feel like it's more meaningful than just a carbon copy layout of exactly the same as what it is somewhere else and exactly what the same is somewhere else.
What is it in you? This is a bit of a self-reflection piece. What is it in you that makes or helps you own own the March on brand as if it was your own?
Um, I think I always wanted to own my own gym. I thought that was success for me. Um, and as I have gone through this process of having the responsibility and a lot of the um, responsibilities, pressure, stress that I would have if I was a business owner, I know that I wouldn't want to put my own head on the blocks in a way and do it just myself. I think that um, uh, from a fitness perspective and attempting and failing to be an athlete, you have that almost like seeking better and trying to have improvement with what you're doing. And I think a lot of those values that I learned through training and through fitness bled into how I approached certain things. So for me, it's almost like, well, there isn't really an option other than for me to just push my chips in and go for it because I would be disheartened. I would be regretful down the line if I hadn't have given everything my best shot and just gone for it. And that's sometimes at the detriment of feeling a bit burnt out at times, feeling overworked, feeling stressed. But at the same time, it makes when things come good or that there is recognition or you are able to reflect and you look back at certain key points. Like I look back at the second year anniversary at Stratford, and I just remember seeing a group of 60 odd people inside the gym that had turned up on that anniversary day to come and do a workout and celebrate the gym. And it was nothing to do with celebrating me. That was about they were all celebrating what March On meant to them. And I was able to take pride in that I had helped facilitate that. Um, so I guess it's just maybe that the reason why I treat it like my own is that I would feel a level of dissatisfaction if I didn't put anything other than my best effort into trying to make it succeed. Because I also know that the success or the reward that I would get from certain landmarks or milestones or cool things that I get to experience would are going to taste all the more sweeter through the effort that I would put into it.
Lovely. Dedication to your craft.
Yeah.
You mentioned recognition in there. We've spoken about this before.
Mm.
Where are you up to with the need for external recognition versus your self-recognition of I'm doing okay?
Yeah. It's a really good conversation that I had the same day that we had a great conversation. I had a really good conversation with a therapist, and this is something that I'm having constant discussions with just people in general, because it's something that I want to bring more awareness to, because there is and has been for many years a constant drive for approval, attention, affection, in a lot of areas of my life. I think that's again similar to the point that I made, where this sort of the idea that I have to try and put as much effort into whatever I can do, and this, coming back from trying to push my chips into being an athlete, bled over into other areas of my life, is that it was this um, very high standards that I would hold for myself, whether that is body image, whether that is financially, whether that is satisfaction in my career, et cetera, et cetera. So I would hold high standards. So anything other than the highest of standards would feel like a bit of a failure. And something with the conversation that I had with the therapist was, um, and it was actually the same day that I had a really good chat with Liam Holmes. And we were talking about a diet phase that I have been going through, and I haven't been able to get down to my quotations goal weight that I had set for myself, and felt an element of failure from that. And it's just a classic, like being able to have
What was your feeling there at that point?
what having not been able to do it.
Mm,
Yes, failure. That
okay.
like
And what was the emotion though? I'm not trying to I'm not trying to make you emotional. I'm genuinely interested. How did it make you feel?
um uh I would say it's more kind of like it was probably aggression towards myself, of just like you're useless. So like
Mm,
that kind of
mm.
internal narrative where it would be just stop fucking saying yes to like social occasions and going out for meals and deciding to have two starters and two mains. Like you're your own worst enemy. And uh internal narratives that's not healthy, but saying things like you fucking train however many sessions a week and you look like this. Um, and going back to the comment from the therapist and basically what Liam said, it was like, just because you didn't hit your goal weight or just because you didn't get to what you deemed as success doesn't mean it's been a failure. So it's like that saying of like aim for the stars and you'll hit the moon, or aim for the moon and you'll hit the stars, whatever it is like I had started at 99 kg when I was on my deficit and I got down to 91.4, but I wanted to get down to 90 and I was deeming that as a failure. But if I took my emotions out of it and someone within my cohort or a client that I was working with had said that to me, I'd be like, fuck me, you've lost like 7.5 kilos. That's unbelievable. Like people would bite your hand off, or you probably bite my hand if I told you like we can click your fingers and you're gonna lose 7.5 kilos. So it's just kind of that's something that I have been um thinking more about, is just because I haven't necessarily hit a certain level of success that maybe someone else has set as a target for me, whether that's membership numbers, whether that's recurring revenue, whether that's a body image that I've deemed to be as what I think I should look like. Just because I haven't hit that doesn't mean that it's a failure. It's like there's still success along the way, along that path, without it having to be perfection.
Mm. And I guess the pros and cons of both sides, right? Because we also don't want to veer the other way where we make excuses for ourselves in every situation. It's like, well, if it goes wrong, I'll just shift my definition of success and then it's not a failure, right? I don't think that's useful for anybody.
Mm.
But at the same time, holding yourself to unreasonable definitions of success are also not ideal.
Yeah.
And the difference there is this is and this this speaks to your general challenge of, I guess, your outlook, your view on a lot of things, where you have a tendency to zoom in into one particular thing and go after that in its own right as success, with without thinking about all the other things that are happening around it, right? Would that be fair?
Yeah, for sure.
And this might link back to, the challenge with the art and the science, where your mind, in the way that it works, just has a tendency to burrow its way in into the finite detail of the thing and get lost in what matters.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Sally's over here wondering what the fuck's going on, right? And we've lost really why we're doing the thing. And I guess, I don't need to tell you, but just to speak it out as we're going through this, the the benefits of the social interactions, the enjoyment you got from having two starters, da 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 da. And again, we're not going the other way where it's like, you can do whatever you want and that's okay. But
Mm.
I know from that weekend that you had a fucking good weekend.
Mm.
And there was so much to bring from that, right? And so then I guess who does this really well for me is Chad. And I know we make light of it, and there's always a joke in it on social media and stuff, but he does. I think Chad does a great job of moving needles in the right direction whilst thinking big picture and
Mm.
going, I know I'm on the shred, but this situation don't come around all the time. I'm in a great place with people I love, and I'm gonna have the fucking cheesecake, or I'm gonna have a beer. It's okay. And then, I'll do what I can tomorrow and so on and so forth.
Mm.
And I know it's cliche and I know it's idealistic, but it's I think that then moves closer towards the idea of a balance, right? Would that be fair? And
Yeah.
that's is that then the balance that we're talking about between the objective and the subjective?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think the that narrative is there with me, but then I think the negative commentary afterwards will then take over the commentary of, but you had a good time and you were with your mates sort of thing at the weekend.
Yeah,
So I think it's about, because again, if I was having those conversations with a client or a friend or something else, I would be saying to them, like, treat yourself with a bit more compassion, or like take your, emotions out of it a little bit more.
yeah.
But that's harder to do yourself. So I guess it comes down to having a better understanding of my own. emotions and recognizing them earlier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a very impactful conversation a little while ago where the person on the other side, who is a very special and talented individual, just very timely pointed out to me that you are not your emotions.
Mm,
And it just at the time that they said that to me, it it made a lot of sense to me. And my tendency is to not only feel the emotion, but then to hold it within me and think the shit out of it,
mm,
as opposed to just seeing it for what it is and letting it flow through.
mm.
Um, so that was my experience with that was that the emotion things, same as thoughts, should go through us as a conduit rather than a bucket that catches them all.
Yeah.
Um, Back to the recognition piece then, how does this all connect back into the recognition of that external sort of nod of you doing all right? Where does that fit into this for you? Because I know you value that highly. I know you enjoy that.
Yeah. I think it's about trying to rewire or just change the gold standard of like approval to being more um approval from myself. Without getting too deep, I think it's an element of uh and this is something that I was discussing was like a lack of respect for myself, so that when I give myself praise, it doesn't land because I don't respect my own praise as much as someone else giving me praise.
Got it.
So I think it's then being giving myself more respect or holding myself in a higher regard, and then valuing the praise that I'm giving to myself in a way,
Yeah.
rather than it being, yeah, rather than it having to be from someone else other than me.
So it's a self-worth piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Got it. That's what you're working on.
Yeah.
Good. Good. I paused there just for a sec because I think it's important for people to listen and hear that you are human, right? And I know that sounds stupid because it's me and you talking and we're pals and we know that, but I think there can be a tendency for people outside March on looking in that, we've got it all figured out and we're infallible and, you know, um, yeah, everything's pointing in the right direction. But it's not the case. It's not the case. And I think what we can all vouch for is that we're all doing our best.
Yeah.
Um, and that's all. And that's all that anybody can do. And again, I think that speaks back to the gyms. I think that speaks back to the gyms. Whether or not we get it right, it's that everybody under this roof is going to be pulling in the same direction. And that's clear. That's clear. So we're all looking to grow. We're all understanding that team is everything. So, no one person in here is bigger than the team. And I think that's the right thing. That's how we've all been brought up, right? And I think that's a good thing. Keeps everybody humble, keeps everybody reminded of their place in the world, in that, we're part of a bigger thing. And whilst we do deserve to give ourselves respect and we do give ourselves deserve to value, our own recognition and all the rest of it, at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to measure that based on how I'm cooperating and connecting with those around me. Team is everything.
Mm.
And then that's why I think that you lot as coaches do a fantastic job of injecting that into the culture of each gym because it can be felt. March on ain't the place where at the end of the session everybody fucks off and leaves the plates on the floor.
Yeah.
March on ain't the place where you're going to go into the toilet and there's an empty toilet roll, or there's piss on the seat, or whatever else. There's towels on the floor. It's a mess. It's
Mm.
not. It's not the place because people look after it like it's their own, like you look after it like it's your own. And I
Mm.
think whilst I think it's one of his strengths, I think it is humility is one of his strengths, but although he says I haven't got any talents, one of his biggest talents for me is to subconsciously inject that thought from him and his brand into everybody that comes through the doors, however he does it. And I think he does so in different ways. And that then bleeds through to the product that we see on the gym floor.
Mm.
And you and I know, right? As the whole thing grows, the gyms are now not the most important thing in the March on ecosystem.
Yeah, or the only.
They're a pillar, and the one of it's the showcase, right, of the quality that we have in coaching. So it is super important. But there are other things that bring in more revenue, more reach and all the rest of it. But then it is the place for me that embodies what all started. And I think that's super important.
Yeah,
That's super important. And that gets round to my view on this thing as to what makes a March on gym. It's like it's a gym that if you didn't know any better, Ollie Marchon would be running this thing because Patrick James, Liam Carmichael, Justin Canusi, or Alex Reeder, they all share and align with those values.
yeah,
And I think that's a fucking powerful thing.
100%. Essential.
Essential. Yeah. Yeah. Let's bring it back round then, just to the science and the art. You knowing that about yourself, how are you managing that in your education, your development of the coaches that are under your wing?
Yeah, I think it's something that springs to mind is collaboration. So rather than dictating what a process, it's let's collaborate on X and come up with it so that we're all bought in and we all agree with what it is that we have decided to do. So, for example, when we had our group CPD session, we were talking about initial consultations. I recorded an initial consultation with someone that I did, voice recorded it. Um, we all listened to it as a group and then picked it apart and created a structure as to how to go about it and, hashed out ideas on it. And everyone was like, yeah, cool. You did this that I liked. Maybe I think this, maybe I think that, etc. So now everyone has a better idea of what is expected of them, but also they helped create that in a way. And it wasn't me saying, this is what you need to do. It was, this is what I've done. What do you guys think? And I think that whether that is us writing a program, whether that is us talking about what classes we can improve in terms of an offering, etc. It's like collaboration and everyone's input, everyone has a voice and team is everything, not this is how you do X and that's it.
Yeah,
Uh,
great.
so I think that's where the art of collaboration means that yes, we have everyone has their own sort of different remits or their different experiences that they can input. We have an understanding of the science or the processes that we need to do, but by coming all together and all having our own 2 cents, it's similar to like what we talked about with like the DNA or the identity of the gym is that it feels like our own. So the structure of how to run an initial consultation, we feel like we've all created it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Because I guess in some respects, you start ahead really of a baseline because I know that this is always outlook on it. Hire good people before you hire great coaches, knowing that there are many great coaching minds out there that are terrible at relating to people, and
Yeah.
they just find themselves on Instagram just putting out information, which is fine and it can be useful, but it's great people that connect to great people, and so everybody that's in a March on Coaches t-shirt is first and foremost a great person,
Yeah.
and so then I guess you have a bit of wiggle room and probably some space, to be honest, to really, I guess, load on the technical element. He's like, well,
Yeah.
they're already good. By nature, they're going to want to be nice to these people. By nature, they're going to change the toilet roll. By nature, they're going to pick shit up, you know, and so on and so forth. By nature, they're going to welcome this person in. By nature, they're going to ask the person how the meeting was yesterday and all the rest of it. They're going to do that. And so then you can just go, okay, cool. Well, actually, what you do need in your progression pathway is some technical elements. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the while, then, I guess keeping your eye on not beating out that softer side, that care side with technical stuff.
Mm. Yeah.
Like remember. So I know we've just gone through the ins and outs of what's happening at these joints in this particular movement, but let's just bring it all back round to where I know you naturally want to be. Remember that this is about Sally. So what does Sally need today,
Mm.
despite all that?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good chats.
Cheers, man.
Let's leave it there. Thanks for being open. I know there's some things in there you didn't need to share, but appreciated it. I think it made for some great stuff. I know people will enjoy listening to that. It's always it's always good to it's always I think it's always good. It's always super powerful to listen to people that you admire and look up to in the industry. And even if you don't, you see that they're doing a good job and maybe they're on a level and they're a peer, whatever. It's always good to listen to somebody else and have them be open and vulnerable about their situation. I think it makes you human, and
Mm.
you've always been fantastic at that. You spoke about it before. You were there when I first came down, and we spent that time together. It was the sense I got, and I think it'll always be the sense that I'll get from you. And I think it's what keeps you great, mate. If I'm being honest, again, not to gas you up. I've said this on every episode, but it's hard not to with our crew because you're a fantastic bunch and a talented bunch and a great bunch of people. So keep doing you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Cheers, Mass.
We'll speak again.
Oh, yeah.